Doc Filed was slapped on my mailbox just as I caught Karen measuring my fence line like she owned the whole cul-de-sac. She smirked and said the HOA had posted a violation against me claiming my gate encroached on community land she'd never set foot on. So I pulled the plat map and the original property deed, the documents that showed exactly whose boundary her little crusade was trespassing right before the real fight began. "I'm done being pressed," I told her. Finally, someone fought back. I knew the road better than I knew most people. Every bend up Alpine Ridge had a memory nailed to it where Dad once slid the truck in a late March snow, where I'd pulled a deer off the shoulder in the dark, where I'd stopped to watch a wildfire line creep along the ridge in 17. A year away hadn't changed the curves. It had changed everything else. By the time I eased my old pickup around the last turn, the air had that sharp evening bite pine cold and thin. My cabin sat where it always had, tucked against the trees with the ridge rising behind it, wood darkened by years of weather and smoke. For a second it looked exactly like I left it. Then my stomach dropped. The front door was open. Not just unlatched open. A slice of warm yellow light spilled out across the porch boards I'd sanded myself. My engine ticked as it cooled. I killed the headlights and just sat there, hands on the wheel, listening to the night. A kid laughed from inside my cabin. The sound hit harder than any fist. I climbed out, boots crunching on the gravel. The cold went straight through my jacket in that way it only does when something is wrong. Halfway to the porch, I saw it, a paper slapped crooked on the doorframe, the corners lifting in the wind. Filed, it said in the big block letters. Underneath, in cleaner print, HOA, Alpine Ridge, President Linda Carver. I let out a low breath. "What the hell did you do, Linda?" The boards creaked under my weight as I stepped onto the porch. I pulled my keyring from my pocket out of habit, the brass edge worn smooth from years of use. I slid the cabin key toward the lock on reflex, then stopped. The lock was new, shiny. Wrong. I tried anyway. The teeth scraped, caught, and refused to turn. My hand tightened around the key. That little piece of metal had opened this door since the year my old man and I hung it, and now it might as well have belonged to a stranger. Another laugh inside. A cartoon played on low volume. I could smell something cooking: tomato sauce, cheap garlic bread. Home, just not mine. I knocked once hard. The talking inside cut off. Footsteps, then the door opened wider. A man my age, maybe a little younger, stood there in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, eyes narrowing as he looked me over. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. I stared past him for half a second. My couch, my cast-iron stove, the knot in the floorboard by the coffee table I'd never bothered to fix. All there. A woman stood in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. A little girl peeked around her hip, clutching a stuffed bear. "Yeah," I said, dragging my gaze back to him. "You can tell me why you're standing in my cabin." The man blinked. "This is my place," Toy said, jabbing a thumb over my shoulder at the tree line. "Built it with my father. Paid taxes on it every year I've been breathing. Who are you?" He shifted his weight, defensive now. "We're leasing. Miss Carver told us the owner left a year ago and wasn't coming back." My jaw tightened. "I left. I didn't disappear. And I sure as hell didn't sell this cabin. Not a damn inch of it." The woman stepped forward, voice cautious. "We went through all the proper channels. HOA office, application, deposit. They showed us the paperwork. Said the owner had signed off." "Show me," I said. The man hesitated, then turned. Walked to the coffee table. My coffee table, and picked up a folder. He handed it to me like he was offering proof that gravity worked. On top was a single sheet with a county seal printed faint but official-looking. "Occupancy permit," it read. Below that, my parcel number, my ridge, my cabin description, and my name, Elias Boone. Only the signature underneath wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. The pressure on the downstrokes was wrong. It looked like someone had practiced copying my hand from an old check, then decided close enough was good enough to steal a man's home. My thumb pressed into the paper until the fibers wrinkled. Behind me, the evening wind brushed past, rattling the filed notice on the doorframe. That cheap tape squeaked against the wood, loud in the silence. "Who filed this?" I asked, voice low. "HOA handled it," the man said quickly. "Everything went through them." Ms. Carver said, "Yeah, toy, katloy." I keep hearing what Ms. Carver said. I'm a little more interested in what I actually signed. And that sure as hell isn't it. I pulled my phone out, snapped a photo of the permit, then leaned back and got the filed notice in frame too. Linda's name sharp in the porch light, sent both to the same contact I'd had in my phone for 20 years. Rayner. "This isn't my signature. Call me." The little girl's voice piped up soft and puzzled. "Mom? Is he the old owner?" Her mother shushed her gently. "Honey, go finish your show." She looked at me, guilt and worry written all over her face. "We really did think this was all above board, Mr. Boontoy Nye, the name on that paper, the one they forged." The man spread his hands, helpless. "Look, sir, we're just trying to keep a roof over our kid's head. The HOA said the property was basically abandoned. We had no reason to doubt them." I believed him, and that almost made it worse. Frontline always looked human. The real rot lived behind desks. My phone buzzed in my hand. Sheriff Rayner's name lit up the screen. I stepped back out onto the porch. Answer. "Rayner." His voice came through rough with sleep and irritation. "You better have a good reason for sending me blurry pictures after dark, Elias. I just came home, Toy Nye. Door was open. There's a family living in my cabin." He was quiet for half a beat. "Your cabin? Yeah. And they've got an occupancy permit with my name on it. Toinyan Sung to J. Kihiu County Jatau Numaitukak. Except the signature's not mine. Hold that paper up," he said, closer to the light. I angled it toward the porch bulb. The wind tried to snatch it. I held tight. Closer, Ong Juk. "There. Don't move." I heard him exhale through his teeth. "Lias. That's not your hand. That's what I've been saying. Send me one more Rayner Noy. Get the filed notice, too. I think I see an HOA header." I took another shot, the word filed sitting over Linda Carver's name like a bad joke. Sent it. There was a pause on the line, longer this time. "It was filed 11 months ago," Rayner finally said. "Right after you left the ridge." I stared into the warm rectangle of light spilling out of my own front door, now full of someone else's life. A year gone, and in less than 12 months someone had managed to decide I wasn't coming back and put it in ink. Yeah, and I never sold it. Sheriff Rayner's office smelled like old coffee and older paper, the kind that's been stacked, moved, and restacked since before anyone bothered to digitize anything. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I sat in the hard plastic chair across from his desk while he fed the occupancy permit into a worn-out scanner. The machine chirped to life. Beep, whir, beep. He leaned in, glasses low on his nose, watching the screen as the image appeared, my name, big and bold, at the bottom of the form. "Here we go," he muttered. "Occupancy permit parcel AR-17C. Signature of owner Elias Boone." He rotated the image, zoomed in on the bottom, then turned the monitor so I could see it better. "Look familiar?" he asked. The signature looked like mine at a glance. The shape was close, but the weight was all wrong. No hesitation on the first stroke, no heavy press on the downstroke of the B. Whoever'd written it had confidence I didn't have when I signed legal things. "That's not my hand," I said. "Someone copied it." Rayner grunted. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." He clicked to pull up the filing metadata. The county system coughed up a line of text. "These filings came through Linda Carver's HOA office," he read aloud. "Submitted via third-party portal." My jaw clenched. So Linda didn't just know about this. She pushed it through. "Let's not jump too far ahead," he said, though his tone said he agreed with me more than he wanted to. "We follow the paper." He hit print. The scanner piped up again. Beep. I watched the page slide out warm and a little curled. He handed it to me and nodded toward the public kiosk in the corner, the kind meant for folks who didn't have a lawyer or patience for forms. "Humor me," he said. "Run that permit number yourself. I want to see what the system tells you." I walked over, permit in hand. The kiosk screen blinked awake when I tapped it, the county seal flickering before settling into a search screen. Permit ID. I typed in the string of letters and numbers from the top of the form. Hit Enter. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a red box popped up. No matching record found. Please verify entry. I double-checked the ID character by character. Typed it again. Same answer. I turned back. Doesn't exist, I said. Not in this system. Rayner leaned back in his chair, the old springs complaining. Interesting. Interesting isn't the word I'd pick, I replied. He stood, grabbed the printed copy from me, and held it up next to the screen. So, we have an official-looking document that scanned just fine. County header parcel number, your name signature. But when we ask the database about it, it shrugs and walks away. Meaning, he said someone either pushed it through a side channel or mocked up a form to look like ours. He turned the page, eyes narrowing as he read a line halfway down. Here he said, "Read this." I took it back. There, in smaller text under a section labeled Conditions, was a line that made the hair on my arms stand up. Transfer initiated due to owner inactivity. 12 months. I read it twice. Out loud the second time. Transfer initiated due to owner inactivity. 12 months. I laughed once, but there wasn't any humor in it. So I go off the mountain for a year, and suddenly that means anybody with a printer and a clipboard can move into my cabin. It doesn't mean that Reiner said. Not legally. But it tells me exactly what narrative someone's trying to build. Abandonment, I said. He nodded. If Carver filed this, she's setting up an abandonment narrative. Poor little cabin left all alone. HOA stepped in to save it. Stuff like that plays well in hearing rooms when no one fights back. My hand tightened around the paper until the edge bit into my skin. I never sold this place. Not on paper, not in words, not in my sleep. Yeah, he said softly. I believe you. He walked over to a different monitor on the wall, this one hooked into the county GIS system. With a few keystrokes, he pulled up the ridge. Alpine Ridge bloomed onto the screen, a top-down view of land parcels and old logging roads, contour lines curling like fingerprints. He zoomed in until my little rectangle of earth appeared. My cabin, my trees, my driveway. Except it wasn't just my rectangle anymore. A bright blue icon pulsed on top of it. Common access point proposed. Rayner stared at it for a long moment. That wasn't there last year, he said. Common access point, I repeated. For who, looks like it ties into a planned development overlay, he said, tapping a key. Another layer flicked on faint outlines of cul-de-sacs and model homes creeping up the mountain like mold. Summit Vale Partners. They've had plans sitting in the queue for a while waiting on approvals. And one of their access roads, he tapped my cabin, runs right through your living room. My throat felt dry. So they draw a road on a map, slap owner inactivity on me, and suddenly my home is a shortcut. On paper, that's the attempt, he said. I tore my eyes away from the screen and looked at him. Can they do that? Not legally, he said. Not the way this is written. But if no one objects, if no one checks signatures, if everybody just assumes the process is clean. He let the thought hang there. I looked back at the blue icon blinking on and off over my cabin like a heartbeat that didn't belong to it. Someone wants your cabin on paper before taking it for real, Rayner said quietly. I stared at the map, at the little digital square that was supposed to represent my whole history on that ridge, and felt something in my chest go from cold to burning hot. They're going to find out, I said, I'm a hell of a lot harder to erase than a line on a screen. The HOA clubhouse looked the same as it had the day I left the ridge, a boxy building of glued stone veneer pretending to be rustic fluorescent lights humming above a carpet that had given up years ago. What had changed was the woman waiting for me. Linda Carver stepped out of the boardroom as if she'd rehearsed the timing. Her blazer was too crisp for mountain towns, and her smile was the kind that never touched her eyes. "Mr. Boone," she said, voice bright but hollow. "Glad you finally returned." Finally. As if I'd missed an appointment with her instead of my own front door hanging open to strangers. I didn't shake her hand. "We need to talk about the people living in my cabin." "Of course," she said cheerfully, turning on her heel. "Come in. We kept everything documented. Inside, the club's meeting table was already set. A stack of binders sat neatly arranged, every tab color-coded. Red, blue, yellow, the kind of organization that made reasonable people nervous. She slid into a seat and gestured for me to take the one across. Let's start with this. She opened the top binder, flipped 3 pages with fast, confident fingers, and laid a sheet in front of me. Owner non-responsiveness log. Dated entries, 12 months worth. You appear to have been unreachable for quite some time, she said. We attempted contact repeatedly. I scanned the page. It listed emails I'd never seen, letters I'd never received, voicemail attempts I sure as hell wouldn't have ignored if they'd happened. I didn't get any of this. Linda folded her hands. That's the problem, Mr. Boone. When an owner abandons responsibility for a property, the HOA is obligated to protect the asset. It's not your asset, I said. It's my cabin. Her smile tightened. Words matter. Legally speaking, your absence created flexibility. I leaned forward. Flexibility to do what? Instead of answering, she reached for another document. This one she set down more gently, like it carried weight she wanted me to feel. Notice of access. Preliminary transfer authorization. My name was printed at the bottom, and beneath it, that same fake signature. I never authorized this, I said. I never signed anything like it. She tilted her head. Your inactivity constitutes implied authorization. That's not how the law works. That's how HOA covenants work, she corrected. You left for a year. We had to protect the asset. You keep using that word, I said. Asset. That's not what a man calls his home. That's what a banker calls something he's about to take. A couple of board members shifted in their seats. One cleared his throat but didn't speak. Linda kept her eyes on me. Mr. Boone, the transfer paperwork indicates you either sold or delegated stewardship of the cabin to the association. In your absence, we exercised that stewardship. I never sold it, Toynaklai, each word slow and sharp. Not a scrap of dirt. You forged my name. She gave a tiny shrug. Prove that. The security camera in the corner blinked red. I looked up at it, then back at her. Is this meeting recorded? Footage only stores when board business is conducted, she said. This is an informal courtesy. I pushed the notice of access back toward her. Tell me why this exists. She lowered her voice, leaning closer so the board members pretended not to hear. Summit Vale needs that road, Mr. Boone. They've been waiting for your parcel to free up. Don't stand in the way. There it was, the thing she'd been dancing around since I walked in. I looked straight at the blinking camera light. Say that again, I said. On record. Her expression didn't flicker. There is no record today, Mr. Boone. Silence filled the room, thick as dust. I sat back, feeling that familiar shift inside, the point where outrage stops being heat and turns into something colder, something that doesn't back up or look away. You're claiming, Toynoi Chamrai, that while I was gone you filed documents saying I sold my cabin, and you used them to put strangers in it. We acted in the community's best interest, she said. This development will bring value, infrastructure, new tax revenue, not on my land. Now her smile finally cracked. You can make this easy or hard, Mr. Boone. The hard way only hurts you. I stood. The chair legs screeched across the carpet. A board member jumped. I gathered the forged papers, slid them into my jacket. As I reached the doorway, I turned back. You want my cabin on paper, I said quietly, but I'm back now, and I don't bend. Linda clasped her binder a little too tight. We'll see. I stepped out of the clubhouse into the cold evening air, the door whispering shut behind me. The mountains stood quiet and familiar, but for the first time since returning, I felt something else beneath the surface. They'd written a story for me while I was gone. Now I was going to tear it apart. The message came in at 8:12 p.m., right when the ridge wind started scraping branches against my cabin window. I was sorting through the forged documents I'd taken from the HOA clubhouse, trying to make sense of how many lies a person could stack on one piece of paper when my phone buzzed. No subject. No recognizable sender. Just one line I worked under Linda. We need to talk tonight. I froze, reading it twice, then 3 times. Another line followed as if the sender saw my hesitation through the screen. I can prove what she did. Please. Before they lock everything down. Beneath it was an attachment shadow deed scan PDF. My thumb hovered over the file. I tapped. The document loaded crooked like someone had shoved a wrinkled sheet into an old copier. Across the top plain as sunrise were the words, Transfer of Ownership, Parcel AR 17s, C, my land, my cabin. A deed showing I no longer owned either. And at the bottom right above the notarization block sat a signature meant to be mine. The same forgery I'd already seen on the occupancy permit, but here it was stamped on the one form that mattered more than any other. I whispered to the empty room, I never sold it. My phone buzzed again. My name is Vanessa. Backlot behind Ridgemart. 9 p.m. Come alone. I checked the time, 8:26. Not much margin. I grabbed my jacket and headed out into the cold. Ridgemart's back lot sat half a mile off the highway, backed up against a cluster of pines and lit by 3 flickering poles that never cooperated on the same night. A low fog had rolled down from the ridge, drifting like smoke across the asphalt. I spotted her before she saw me, a woman sitting stiff-backed in a dented silver sedan with the engine off. Her shoulders were hunched, her face pale in the blue glow of her dashboard. A discarded HOA name tag lay on the passenger seat, flipped upside down as if she didn't want to see it anymore. When I approached, she cracked her window, but didn't unlock the door. "Vanessa," I asked. She exhaled shakily. "You're Elias." "Good. I was worried you wouldn't come." "I'm here," I said. "Now tell me why." She glanced over her shoulder toward the far end of the lot, voice trembling. "You weren't supposed to see that deed. Linda said it would go through clean. Said you were gone for good." "I left the ridge for 1 year," I said. "I didn't vanish. That's not how she told the board. Or Summit Vale." Vanessa's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She framed it like abandonment. "Like you'd walked away and weren't coming back, and that makes my cabin free real estate." She finally unlocked the door. "Please, just get in. I can't be seen talking to you in the open." I slid into the passenger seat. Her hands shook as she handed me a USB drive. "This has everything," she whispered. "Emails, drafts, internal memos, the workflow they used to build the fake transfer. They scanned one of your old signatures from a contractor permit, then pasted it onto a deed template." I turned the drive over in my hand. "Why go this far? Why not just try buying me out?" "They did," she said. "Twice. You didn't respond. So Linda told Summit Vale she could clear the parcel another way." I stared at her. "By inventing a sale." She nodded, tears shining, but not falling. "Lias, the deed says you sold it last year. That's the lie everything is built on." Hearing it out loud landed heavier than reading it on a screen. The ridge had been mine since my father's hands were still strong enough to swing a hammer. Every cut of wood in that cabin carried something of us. To have someone scribble over it, erase it with a forged pen stroke, felt like a blow to the ribs. A gust of wind rattled the chain-link fence behind us. Vanessa lowered her voice. "Summit Vale already paid for a fast-track transfer. That's what they call it. Money moves the paperwork through before questions start. And the HOA. They get influence, favor, maybe a slice of the development contract. Linda kept saying, 'He's gone. He won't fight.' Well, I said quietly she got that wrong." For a moment, Vanessa almost smiled, then her expression changed. She looked past me, eyes wide. A dark SUV sat 3 rows back, engine idling, headlights off, fog drifting around its grille like breath. It hadn't been there when I arrived. The parking lights blinked on. Once, then off. Vanessa whispered, "I think that's them." I didn't take my eyes off it. "Get in my truck. Now. They'll follow. They already are." We moved fast. She grabbed her purse, clutching it to her chest, and hurried to my pickup. As soon as she climbed in, I locked the doors and started the engine. The SUV's headlights flared to life. As I pulled out, Vanessa gripped the dashboard, voice barely audible. "Elias, before you decide what to do, you need to know—" "Say it." They already filed the deed transfer request yesterday. If it clears, the system will say they own your cabin. The ridge road rose ahead of us dark and climbing, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something different take root, not fear, not anger, but a hard, bright edge of resolve. They won't own it, I said. Not while I'm breathing. By 10 at night, the ridge was usually dead quiet. That kind of quiet you only get where the nearest neighbor is more pine tree than person. That night, it didn't hold. At 10:47, I heard engines. Not the familiar rumble of a sheriff's truck or an old pickup grinding up the grade. These were smoother, newer, 3 of them crawling up the mountain road in low gear. Headlights swung between the trunks as they turned into my drive, cutting through the fog that had settled thick over the gravel. I stepped out onto the porch, breath steaming in the cold. The boards felt harder than usual under my boots. Behind me, inside the cabin, I heard Vanessa's footsteps pause. "Elias," she called softly. "What is it?" "Stay away from the windows," I said. "Lights off. Just one lamp." She listened. The main overhead clicked off, leaving only the warm pool of light from a lamp near the wood stove. Out in the drive, 3 dark SUVs rolled to a stop. No light bars, no county markings. The kind of black that drinks up the night instead of reflecting it. Doors opened in unison. 4 men stepped out. Matching jackets, matching boots, matching posture. Not cops, not deputies. But there was a certain kind of confidence in the way they spread out that said they were used to people doing what they were told. One of them looked up at me. "Evening," he called. "Welfare check." I didn't move. "Sheriff's office doesn't drive those," I said. "Got a badge to go with that line?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're with Community Enforcement, Mr. Boone, just here to confirm occupancy status and ensure everyone's safe." "Which community?" I asked. "Because the only one that has jurisdiction past this tree line has a star on their chest." He started up the steps, another man falling in behind him. The fog swirled around their legs, the porch light catching on the plastic of something hanging from the second man's belt. Zip ties. Big ones. My stomach turned to stone. "Stop there," I said. They paused a step below the porch. The lead man lifted his hands in a show of false peace. "We just need to ask a few questions. We've received reports of an unauthorized occupant and potential distress." "That's funny," I cut in, "because the only unauthorized thing I see is you. And if someone up here is in distress, they called the wrong damn number, sending you instead of the sheriff." He took another half-step, testing. "Mr. Boone, if you cooperate, this goes quickly. We just need to see who's inside and confirm the property status." I reached down, tapped the small body cam clipped to my chest. The LED glowed to life, steady green. "Say your authority again," I told him. "On record this time." His gaze flicked to the light. The man behind him shifted his weight, the zip ties bumping against his thigh. "Community Enforcement acting under direction of Alpine Ridge HOA." The lead said a little less smooth now. "We're authorized to perform welfare checks and occupancy verification." "No," I said. "You're not. Welfare checks are law enforcement. You boys are just guys in jackets working for a board with too much free time." One of the others snorted. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, sir." "Oh, I'm sure you can," I said. "Hard way probably involves those zip ties. Maybe a story later about how unstable the old rancher up on the hill got when you tried to help him." The lead contractor's jaw tightened. "We're not here to hurt anyone." "Good," I said. "Then you won't mind staying off my porch, not laying a hand on anyone inside this cabin, and waiting for the sheriff if you think there's a real problem." Fog thickened between us. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, but my voice stayed steady. That mattered more than anything. Behind the front line, a 4th man lingered by the SUVs, talking into a radio clipped to his shoulder. He kept glancing up the road as if expecting backup. "Look," the leader said, lowering his voice. "We have to confirm occupancy status. Is there someone inside claiming to be a tenant of the HOA?" "There is someone inside," I said. "Witness. With evidence. And she's not going anywhere with you." His expression flickered. "Witness to what fraud?" I said. "Forgery. Take your pick." He hesitated, a crack in the confident mask. We're not involved in that. Then don't get involved tonight, I replied, 'cause this, I tapped the camera again, will be going to Sheriff Rayner the DA and any judge who wants to know how far Alpine Ridge HOA is willing to go off the rails. One of the board members must have forgotten to train these guys for that response. You could tell. Their posture changed. The second man dropped his hand away from the zip ties, suddenly conscious of the camera's eye. "Turn that off," the leader said. "No," I answered. For a long moment, nobody moved. The cold bit deeper into my fingers, but I kept them loose at my sides. I wasn't about to give anyone a screenshot to twist into a threat. Finally, he took one small step back. "We'll return with proper paperwork," he said, trying to reclaim authority he'd already lost. "You can't hide behind technicalities forever, Mr. Boone." "Paperwork's where you got in trouble in the first place," I said. "Might want to be sure the next round isn't forged before you wave it around my gate." He turned away, muttering something into his shoulder mic. The others followed, boots thudding on the steps. By the time they reached the SUVs, the night felt like it had grown 3 inches wider. As they pulled away, tires crunching on the gravel, I heard the lead man's voice carry faintly through the open driver's window. "Tell Linda he's not bending." The SUVs merged back down the road, their taillights fading into the fog until there was nothing left but the soft hiss of the wind and the LED on my body cam still glowing green against my chest. I stood there alone on the porch, watching the darkness where they'd been, and understood something clear as the stars hiding behind the clouds. They weren't just coming for a cabin. They were testing how far they could push a man before he broke. And tonight, at least they'd learned I wasn't the one who was going to snap. The county hearing room wasn't large, but it felt like the whole ridge had squeezed into it. Rows of metal chairs' windows cracked just enough to let in the sharp mountain daylight and a podium that looked too small for the trouble about to land on it. Judge Madsen entered exactly on time, 9:00 a.m., not a second late. He tapped his glasses into place and nodded to the clerk. Case, the clerk read Boone versus Alpine Ridge HOA and Summit Vale Partners. The room went still. I sat beside May Collins, who had a stack of documents so neatly arranged it looked like she ironed them. Across from us, Linda Carver perched straight-backed between 2 board officers, face carefully arranged into polite neutrality. Summit Vale's lawyer. A slick-looking man in a tailored suit adjusted his tie, but didn't meet my eyes. The judge glanced around the room. "All right, let's shed some daylight on this mess." May stood. "Your Honor, we're here to prove the simplest fact in the world: Mr. Boone never sold his cabin." My hands tightened on the table. There it was, the truth I'd been repeating ever since I'd driven back onto the ridge. Keener, Summit Vale's attorney, rose. "Your Honor, the HOA acted under established abandonment provisions. The property was unoccupied for 12 months. "Not abandoned," I muttered. Judge Madsen didn't look up from his notes. "Mr. Keener, sit. You'll speak when spoken to." May stepped forward, pulled a small USB from her folder, and placed it on the evidence table. "This," she said, "is the shadow deed file. The complete record of how Summit Vale and the HOA manufactured a transfer of ownership while my client was away." A murmur rippled across the room. Linda's jaw stiffened. "Proceed," the judge said. May clicked a remote. The projector hummed, then the first image appeared, the deed transfer, the one I'd seen in Vanessa's trembling hands. "Parcel AR-17C. Transfer of ownership." My name typed neatly, and beneath it the forged version of my signature. May pointed at the date. "Filed during Mr. Boone's documented absence, and according to the metadata, created almost a month before the signature appears." Keener shot up. "Your Honor, internal drafts aren't proof of wrongdoing." "Sit down, Mr. Keener." "Judge," Madsen repeated more sharply this time. "You'll get your moment to dig your own hole." May advanced to the next slide. An email thread filled the screen subject line. "Fast track transfer." "Fill signature. Later." The line May read aloud echoed through the room. "Occupancy arranged signature to be filled later." Judge Madsen's head snapped up. "Who wrote that?" Summit Vale's project coordinator May said. "Addressed to Ms. Carver's office." All eyes shifted to Linda. She didn't blink. May turned. "We call Vanessa Hale." Vanessa stood slowly from the back row. She walked forward like each step weighed something. When she reached the witness chair, she folded her hands so tightly her knuckles went white. After she was sworn in, May kept her voice soft. "Ms. Hale, what was your role at the HOA?" "I handled document routing," she said. "Scans, filings, internal processing." "Did you ever witness Mr. Boone sign a deed?" "No," she said immediately. "I never saw him. Linda told us he was gone and that the transfer had been approved." May clicked the next slide. The forged deed zoomed in. Ms. Hale explained how this signature was added. Vanessa looked down at her lap, then back up. Linda brought me a scan of one of Mr. Boone's old signatures from a permit. She told me to overlay it onto the deed file. She said Summit Vale needed everything processed before they submitted the access road plan. A sharp intake of breath rolled through the room. Board members' residents, even the deputy by the door. Keener sputtered, "Your Honor, this is hearsay." "It's testimony," Judge Madsen said, slamming his palm lightly on the bench. "And right now, it's a whole lot more believable than a deed that signs itself." May paced slowly. "Ms. Hale, were any communications sent to Mr. Boone notifying him of a transfer?" "No," Vanessa whispered. Linda said contacting him would slow down approvals. I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger, but something cleaner, sharper. Vindication. Sheriff Rayner stood at the back. "Judge, he said my office confirmed the signature is forged. Pressure strokes don't match authenticated samples." "Thank you, Sheriff," the judge replied. He turned to the defense table. "Anything to counter that?" Keener opened his mouth, then closed it. Linda clenched her binder until the plastic warped. May stepped back. "Your Honor, every piece of this scheme depended on one fiction that Mr. Boone had sold his cabin. He didn't. They forged his consent, filled in a deed without him, placed tenants to create the appearance of transition, and prepared to use the access road through his property to fast-track Summit Vale's development." Silence filled the room, heavy, waiting. Judge Madsen leaned back, considering the stack of evidence. Then he nodded slowly. "Well," he said at last, "paper fraud dies fast in daylight." He closed the file with finality. "Here's the ruling. The cabin and all associated property rights are restored to Mr. Boone, effective immediately. All fraudulent filings are void." He wasn't finished. "This court also refers the matter to the district attorney for investigation into forgery, fraudulent transfer attempts, and misuse of HOA authority." A gasp rippled across the HOA side. Linda stared straight ahead, blinking hard. Judge Madsen looked at me. "Mr. Boone, you can go home. It's yours, not just in fact, but on record." For the first time in months, my breath felt full. Vanessa let out a shaky exhale beside me. May placed a steady hand on my arm. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it sounded like a gavel cracking once sharp and clean, sweeping a year of lies off the table. Court adjourned. By the time the sheriff's truck crested the ridge, the morning fog had thickened into a slow-moving tide. It curled around the pines, slid across the gravel, and clung to the cabin gate like it was guarding something old and stubborn. I stood there waiting, hands deep in my jacket pockets, watching the headlights cut through the gray. The truck stopped beside me. Sheriff Rayner stepped out, coat unbuttoned, breath fogging. He didn't say anything at first, just reached into his pocket and drew out a single brass key, the one that had lived on my ring for half my life. "It's yours again, Eli," he said, placing it in my palm. "Officially, legally, and in every system that matters." The weight of it nearly stopped my breath. The key was still warm from his hand. For a moment I just stared at it, letting the cold morning wrap itself around the warmth of something familiar. "I figured it was always mine," I said quietly. "It was," he answered. "But now, there isn't a single bureaucrat in this county who can say otherwise." The fog pressed in around us. Somewhere far below, the town was waking trucks, starting dogs, barking the familiar morning rhythm. Up here, though, it felt like the world had paused just enough to let me take this moment in. "What about the DA?" I asked. He blew out a slow breath. Their office is reviewing it all. Fraudulent transfer attempt. Forgery. Abuse of HOA authority. He shook his head. That's just the first page of things they're considering. I closed my fingers around the key. Good. Yeah, he said. Good. A sedan pulled up behind the sheriff's truck, tires crunching. The engine idled for a moment before shutting off. A woman stepped out, one of the HOA board members' small-framed glasses fogging as she approached. She'd always seemed like the quiet one in meetings, the kind who took notes but never spoke unless forced to. "Mr. Boone," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Sheriff." "Morning," Tanya Rayner said. She held her hands together to keep them from shaking. "I just came from an emergency board meeting. Her voice faltered. She swallowed. "We suspended Linda. Effective immediately. She's been removed from all decision-making authority." I watched her carefully. She wasn't here to defend anything. She looked like someone who'd spent a long night realizing she'd been standing behind the wrong person. "She went too far," Tanya continued. "We all knew she pushed boundaries, but this—" Her voice dropped. "This crossed into something none of us could justify." "You didn't try to stop her before I said." She winced, but didn't argue. "No, and that's why I'm here. I'm sorry, Mr. Boone. Truly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to help straighten what was bent." "What about Summit Vale?" I asked. Her expression tightened. "County suspended their road plan. Full stop. They're under review now." She let out a shaky breath. The developers came in expecting the mountain to roll over for them. Instead, the county attorneys rolled out the red flags. I nodded, once the fog swirling between us. Tanya continued. "We're revising our bylaws. Actual notice requirements, owner confirmation protocols, independent review before any property action. None of this," she gestured vaguely toward my cabin, "will ever happen again, not under our watch." I studied her for a long moment. She didn't look like someone making excuses. She looked like someone carrying the weight of her own regret. "Make sure your board remembers this," I said. "People shouldn't lose their homes because somebody wants a shortcut on a map." "We will," she promised. She gave a small nod to both of us and left her taillights disappearing into the fog as quietly as she'd arrived. When she was gone, Rayner motioned toward the gate. "Go on," he said. "Make sure everything in there feels like yours again." I pushed open the old wooden gate, the hinges groaning the familiar groan. Frost clung to the grass along the path, each blade glinting like glass. My boots made soft crunches as I walked toward the porch. The cabin stood exactly as it always had, a slightly crooked window dent in the lower step, that stubborn patch of siding Dad and I could never get to stain evenly. Even covered in fog, it felt more like home than anything had in a long time. At the door, I paused. Every step of this fight, every forged document, every lie, every sleepless night seemed to gather right behind my ribs. I slid the key into the lock. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then click. Clean, honest, final. The latch gave way, and the door eased open, spilling the cold morning air inside like the mountain was welcoming me home. Rayner waited on the porch, hands in his pockets. "Well?" he asked. I stepped inside and let my eyes travel across the room, the chairs, the stove, the floorboards I'd laid by hand. It didn't matter that strangers had lived here for a few weeks. The place still remembered me. "Yeah," I said. "It's mine." "Always was," he replied. I walked back to the doorway and looked out across the ridge, fog-lifting sunlight beginning to break through the trees. "I never sold it," I said softly, not to him, but to whatever remnants of this past year still lingered in the air. "You tried to bury me on paper. I'm still here." Behind me, the cabin settled with a soft, familiar creak like it was answering back, and for the first time since I returned, I felt something I hadn't dared hope for. Relief. Real, solid, earned relief. By the end of that week, the mountain looked the way it was supposed to look. No strange cars nosing around the curve, no black SUVs idling at the turnout, no headlights pausing just a second too long at my driveway. The only tracks on the gravel were mine and the deer that still thought the road existed purely for them. The ridge was quiet again. Not the uneasy quiet of waiting for the next knock, but the deep old quiet that had been here long before any of us showed up with papers and plans. I found the envelope on the porch that morning tucked under a flat stone by the door, like the mail carrier was afraid it might blow away. County of Ridgeview. The return address. Read, I turned it over in my hands, thumb running along the sealed edge. For the first time in a long time, my first instinct wasn't dread, just curiosity. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet. Ordinance. Updated, the header said. Below that, in plainer language, owner notification and verification requirements have been amended to protect against fraudulent transfers. Thanks for fighting back. No flourish, no speech. Just those words and a printed signature from a council member I barely knew. But it felt like something heavy in the right way, like a stone placed on the correct side of a scale. I pinned the letter to the corkboard by the door, right where the forged notices had once hung. Let them sit there, as a reminder of the difference between power abused and power corrected. The fire in the stove had burned down to coals, casting a low orange light over the cabin walls. It bounced off the knots in the wood, turning the room into a moving painting. Outside, the wind pushed softly against the windows, more of a nudge than a threat. My phone buzzed on the table. One new voicemail. I put it on speaker and set it down. Hey, Elias. Vanessa's voice came through a little tired but lighter than I'd ever heard it. I just wanted to say, thank you for not letting them steamroll you, for not letting them erase what this place means. They're asking me to help clean up old files now. The DA's team. Feels like I'm finally filing things where they belong. She paused, and I could almost see her glancing over her shoulder the way she used to. I'm planning on leaving HOA work, she went on. Going back to school, maybe. Land management, but the kind that doesn't start with a bulldozer. She laughed softly. Anyway, I hope the mountain feels like yours again. It always should have. Take care. The message ended with a faint clatter, like she'd set her own phone down somewhere crowded and noisy. Somewhere that wasn't here. I let the silence settle back in. There were still small things to fix, the kind of work that doesn't make it into ordinances or hearings. The front door hinge, for one. It had taken the brunt of being opened by hands that didn't know its quirks. I grabbed my toolbox from under the stairs and knelt by the frame. The screws had worked themselves loose, leaving the door a fraction off true. I tightened each one, listening to the wood creak and sigh like it was waking up from a bad dream. When I shifted, something slid off the top shelf above the coat rack and landed at my feet with a soft thump. It was an old photo frame, dusty, the glass scratched. I picked it up and wiped it with the corner of my sleeve. The picture underneath showed the cabin the year after we finished it. No scorch marks on the trees yet from the fire that had come close 2 summers later. No new patches on the roof, just fresh wood, bright and hopeful, with me and Dad standing in front of the door. He had one hand on my shoulder and a hammer still in his other. I stared at it a long time. Back then, the idea that someone could take a place from you without ever touching it just by moving ink across a page would have sounded like a bad joke. I set the photo on the mantel above the stove next to the county letter. Outside, the clouds parted just enough to let a beam of sunlight slide down the ridge and through the small front window. It cut across the room, catching dust motes and making them glow. I walked to the doorway and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and clean. The line of the mountains rolled away in every direction, familiar as the veins on the back of my hand. There were no survey stakes out there now, no blinking cameras, no men in matching jackets planning my absence into their schedule. Just the mountain. Just my land. I stepped back inside and put my hand on the inside knob. My key hung from the small hook by the door, right where it belonged. I slipped it off, turned it between my fingers, then slid it into the lock from the inside, just because I could. I twisted. Click. The sound was soft, almost nothing, but it echoed through the cabin like the last word in a long argument finally spoken. I rested my forehead against the cool wood for a second, breathing in the faint smell of smoke and pine sap and old sawdust. Finally. I said the word rough but steady. Someone fought back. Out on the ridge, a gust of wind rose and fell, threading through the trees, carrying the message down into the valley and back again. The mountain wasn't saying thank you. It wasn't saying anything at all. It was just doing what it always had, standing there solid, waiting for the people who belonged on it to remember who they were. And this time on paper, and in truth, it remembered who owned this place. The mountain was quiet again as I locked my cabin with my own key, the county's posted order still sealed to the gate like a quiet verdict the wind couldn't erase. Sunlight cut across the ridgeline, reminding me that the paper fraud they tried to bury me under never survived the daylight. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. And sometimes all a community needs is one person willing to stand up so the rest can see where the line truly is, letting the ridge learn again who owns what. If this story reaches someone facing their own version of forged papers and quiet pressure, share it so they know they're not standing alone.